Hey everyone, I'm Skylar,
And I'm Austin.
and we are here from Runeterra. We're going to talk about patch 1.2, the changes that have come up in the latest balance patch. I believe this is the first big balance patch since Rising Tides has come out, right?
Yeah, that's correct. I don't think patch 1.1 had any functional changes, just like card clarity updates and things like that.
Right. And we'll get into card clarity and maybe some memes as we go through these patch notes too.
Indeed.
So we're just going to kind of go down the list here and talk about what's going on. Definitely, we have a emphasis being placed on expedition changes. That's what
Yeah.
Runeterra is all about. But we'll touch on some of the other stuff too as we go. But we're going to go ahead and get started talking about card updates. There's a big
All
goal
right.
paragraph in there. You know, devs kind of talking about their goals. My takeaway was it's what they've been saying the whole time, pretty
Yeah.
much.
Yeah. I like how transparent they are, honestly. I'm coming from a background of Magic and things like that. And the updates don't come nearly as often or nearly with as much like clarity as they do here. So all you Runeterra players, you're way spoiled.
Yeah. And so, like I said, it's kind of the same stuff they've been saying over and over again. So nothing really spicy to latch onto there. So we'll just jump in and talk about the card updates, and we're gonna have the conversation here. So follow along if you want, and we're kind of just gonna touch on the highlights of the cards. Maybe not go through every single one or get really deep into each one, but we're going to start off with the champion changes, and the first one is Vlad. So Vlad got kind of a spicy change up.
Mhm.
His leveled up form, now when it does its ability, it drains instead of just dealing damage. What do you think?
I mean, obviously a straight buff, like there's no
Yeah.
downside to draining, but I think it's a pretty minor buff, mostly because the good part about Vlad was when he was able to kind of kill your opponent with using the direct damage effect,
Right.
more or less. And it's kind of unlikely that you got to level Vladimir and then also was like kind of like losing the game and needed some like a little bit of extra life to win. That's like not a game state that happens all that often in Expedition. So I think it's like nice, but like ultimately kind of inconsequential, probably.
Yeah, and on my end, I look at it and I'm like, "Ooh, drain! That's really awesome." But I think I've got some tinted glasses on because of that annoying 2/4. Uh, the one Shadow Isles that
That 2-4 is really, really
it's
good.
really good, and it makes me look at Vlad and go, "Oh, well, drain is just good." But you're exactly right. Like the scenarios where you want to drop Vlad and play him, like you want to be finishing off your opponent anyway, and if you're struggling behind already where that drain is significantly going to help you, I like, what is your board state? Are you even doing that much damage with Vlad's ability anyway?
Yeah. Plus, again, this is only a buff when Vlad is leveled up, and
Right.
it's something that's similar to planeswalkers for Magic. It's really you can always look at the ultimate on a planeswalker and think, oh, that's
Right.
really spicy. If I get that off, I'm going to win the game. But that's basically true of like every ultimate on every planeswalker, and that's also true of like every champion. Like when you flip them, you're probably going to win the game. Like making it a little bit better doesn't help you that much more.
Right. So next we got a little bit of a nerf to Karma. She was raised from cost 5 to cost 6.
You say a little bit, and I think that's like quite an understatement because
Yeah.
like that's a lot more. It's only like one mana, but that really changes how the entire card plays. For example, like you can't play it on like turn 10 and cast. This is something that I actually did. For example, I played Karma on turn 10 and I had 13 mana, and then I wanted to use the what is it called? The 7 mana Freljord spell that freezes everything and then destroys everything with 0 toughness. You know
Oh
that
yeah,
combo with
yeah.
Karma.
Winter's Breath? Is that it?
Winter's Breath, right. So I was able to win the game because I had Karma, Winter's Breath, and the Health Potion to gain like 6 life. And if I didn't have that one extra mana for Health Potion, I would have lost. So there's like tiny things like that really mean that like mana is really, really important on the turn you have your like big Karma play.
Yeah, and this is something, I used to listen to a lot of LR cast for Magic, limited resources and stuff, and they always talked about how the difference in like 1 to 2 mana or 2 to 3 mana compared to the difference between 5 to 6 or 6 to 7 is not even comparable. Like the 1 mana jump on those higher cost cards just has a lot more impact compared to those lower tier ones, because you're really drastically pushing out, when you can play those cards and what you can combo them with in a single, late game term, kind of like.
Interestingly, I think that's more specific to Magic than for Runeterra or Hearthstone, and that has to do with like the mana system.
True.
Because with Magic, it's not guaranteed that you're going to get even your 6th land. But in Runeterra, you're always going to get 6 mana on turn 6. So the effect is a little bit less pronounced, but it's definitely still true. Like, definitely, like, the percentages of games that go to like turn 8 are a lot fewer than the ones that go to turn 7, for example, things like that. Right. So definitely, like, the lower impact mana, like the later mana still has like a much bigger impact. I agree.
Okay, next, they're still trying to buff Shin and make him relevant.
Wait, did they buff him already once? Did I miss that?
I believe they did. I want to say maybe. I don't know. I know they just keep trying to do things to Shin to help him work. So now he has had a power increase. At his base level, his power is up from 2 to 3, and his level up power is up from 3 to 4.
Yeah, and I think this one's actually pretty huge, because a 2 to 3 upgrade is like a 50% increase. And more relevantly, it takes out a lot of the units that are available in that expedition. Yes. There's a lot of like 3 mana 3/3s out there, more or less. And before, Shen would just kind of like bounce off of one. Now it just like eats it for free.
Right. It's pretty significant. I mean, Misfortune. He can eat a Draven. There's a lot of other champions out there that he can trade with as well.
Yeah.
He kills Elise now.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
I think Shen got really good here.
Yeah, it's still constructed side, at least. It's kind of like, where does Shen go? Where does he fit in? But he definitely is a little more appealing on the expedition side now. That one power does make a big difference. All right, then we got a nerf to V. So V obviously was a slugger, and the big concern here was actually just her base level, not her leveled up version, even though, I mean, that only gets better with the level up. But they just dropped her by 1 health, so she's down from 5 health to 4 health in her base form, and 6 to 5 in the leveled up form.
This is definitely a ranked nerf, I think, in that, like, I don't think V was that good in Expedition in the first place. Maybe I'm wrong, but now she's like even weaker than she used to be, and I have V like rated like pretty low as a result. With only 4 and a tough, that's like translates to like about like 5 or 6 health. So she's still really good if you like have her in your opening hand and like play a bunch of things and drop her, and she has like 10 power already. But like if you draw her late in the game, she's actually just quite weak.
Yeah, I think definitely this was a constructed sort of change, but at the same time, like, she did make a lot of units that typically feel powerful feel not so powerful. Like Vanguard Cavalry is one that, if you pulled that with V, that's a unit that sticks, right? It's 5 power, 5 toughness with tough, and V would just trade for it. And there's not a lot of stuff that can just trade for that card, or like a boosted Radiant Guardian Gangplank.
These are all like
that kind of
Demacia
stuff.
and 5-drops, which are like supposed to be the biggest units in the game, right?
And she just made them feel like super soft.
So yeah, I agree from like a play design level. I think this is like the right thing to do.
Yeah, now she can pull them in and potentially kill them, but they definitely kill her too, without some outside interference. So next, Hecarim got a buff. So his power is up from 4 to 5 in his base form, and 5 to 6 in his leveled up form.
Yeah, this is like a pretty small change, which is, I mean, definitely helpful. Hecarim was seeing like very little play, according to our tracker at Runeterra anyways. But I think this is a really, really small change based on like, if you think about where Hecarim's power actually comes from, a lot of the power is tied into Spectral Riders, right? It makes 2 2/2s that have ephemeral. So he went from about 8 total power to 9 total power, which is like a small increase, but not that meaningful of an increase.
Yeah, I don't really have much to comment about or say about Hecarim. He hasn't been appealing to me in Constructed or in Expedition either way, and the 1 power probably just makes me feel less bad if I'm in a position where I feel like I have to take him for some reason.
Yeah.
It's not making me excited to grab him, now.
I think the thing about Hecarim in Expeditions is that like the card itself is fine. Like I usually play this card on its own, but the buckets it's offered in are pretty bad. You don't want to be drafting ephemeral units generally because they're all kind of weak. They don't help you gain control of the board, and that is the most important thing to do in an expedition run to gain control of the board.
Yeah. All right, so that's all the champion changes. We're going to move on to some followers and spells. So we have a ton of changes to Demacia and the Scouts. We also have a ton of changes to Noxus Burn and some changes to some other kind of superpowered cards. A lot of these were definitely constructed changes, but a lot of them are going to have a pretty big impact in Expedition as well. So the first one up is Great Horn Companion. So this got a power buff from 4 to 5.
Yeah, I think this is super meaningful. Again, like if you think about what a difference one power makes here, because it has Scout, the effect is almost doubled. Of course, it won't always be. Like sometimes your Great Horn Companion just runs into another 5/5 and they just trade off. But if you get to attack twice with the 5/5, that's like hitting for 10 damage to the 8, which is a pretty big improvement. I think this card is now really, really strong.
Yeah, and there are so many 5-mana 5/5s of some type or other that I think having a 4/5, like the stats felt pretty good if you were dropping Great Horn on turn 5 and there was a bunch of small stuff on the board that you could trade with. They felt pretty bad if you were dropping this on like turn 7 or 8 or something, and there's already like some chunky stuff on the other side of the board. And I don't know, like I think the power buff definitely does make a pretty big difference in those cases. It also is a little more threatening, with those 5/5s on the opposite side of the board. Now they can't just eat your Great Horn Companion and, trade for another unit.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Grizzled Ranger. Oh, Grizzled Ranger.
Man. So I don't even think this is the best card in all of like Rising Tides, not even at like Rare, for example, but I recognize that like a lot of people thought he was, and they were like kind of unhappy running into it all the time. And I think
he was really strong in general. And I mean, what they did is they nerfed the power of the Grizzled Ranger from 4 to 3. And they also nerfed the power of the Loyal Badger Bear that you get from the Last Breath effect from a 4 to a 3 as well.
Which it's also a card you can play on its own. Loyal Badger Bear was just a good card to play as a 3-mana 4/4, and now it's just a 3-mana 3/4.
Which is not as good, but I mean, it's still solid stats.
I think Grizzled Ranger and Loyal Badger Bear are still cards I would always play, always be like pretty happy to play. Now they just seem like reasonable cards instead of like fairly broken cards.
Okay, so they tried to give a little bit of a buff to Laurent Chevalier. I think that's how you say that. So it got a health buff from 1 to 2. Now, this card is one that I pass over all the time, and I kind of just want to put this out there. Yeah. The card is a 4-mana 3/2 now that has Challenger, and when you strike, it creates another random Challenger follower in hand. So what's your opinion on this card pre-nerf, or pre-buff and post-buff?
I thought it was horrible post-buff. I think you were absolutely right to pass it all the time. And the reason comes down to the fact that Strike is actually a really hard mechanic to trigger, especially if your opponent like doesn't want you to trigger it, because they can do all kinds of things. Like basically every combat trick will stop it. For example, like frostbite, for example, barrier, things like that, or any kind of like direct damage, like a Mystic Shot, for example, will also prevent the strike from happening. So it was like super unlikely that you were ever able to actually get the second random Challenger. And without that, you're just paying 4 mana into a 3/1, now a 3/2, which is not a good body.
Right. I would much rather drop like a Jaw Hunter.
Yeah.
For way more value. Yeah, I don't know. Like I get what they're doing with the health buff here, because there is a lot of 1 damage style removal in the game with Rising Tides. I mean, there was some there anyway, but you have stuff like Make It Rain now.
Yeah, Make It Rain is everywhere.
Yeah, and this makes it a little less susceptible to that, but Strike is one of those things that there's almost always an answer for.
Yeah.
And if you if your opponent doesn't have an answer for it, then I mean, it feels really good, but I can count on one hand the number of times that I played against someone who was like, oh, this strike creature is getting the best of me. I have no answers.
I think it's usually like Teemo, specifically Teemo and like only Teemo, is because it has elusive as well, which makes it a lot more likely to be able to connect again and again. But
right.
Yeah.
Let's see. We got a bit of a nerf to standalone. So the cost for standalone is up from 3 to 4. So standalone was the 4 cost burst spell that says if you have exactly cost. Oh yeah, it was 3 costs. Now it's 4 costs. It says if you have exactly one ally, grant it +3/+3. And this was like 100% a constructed nerf to this card. There was a combo out there that revolved around holding on to 3 mana, playing like Fiora or I think Solitary Monk on like turn 3.
Ooh, Solitary Monk, I see.
And then hitting standalone on it to just get a big chunky unit on turn 3, and then you just kind of snowball out of control from there. So what do you think the impact is in Expedition? Because this is not a card I'm picking hardly ever.
Yeah, in Expedition, this was already pretty bad. The reason being, like, yeah, it's probably okay on turn 3 if you get +3/+3 out of it. But after turn 3, it's actually really hard to only have one unit on board. Like, if that is the case, you are probably going to lose the game, actually. So, yeah, I think I dropped it from, like, I don't know, like a D to like a D- or something like that. It's still not a good card. Just don't play it.
All right, Legion Rearguard also got a nerf. This came out of a desire from Riot to nerf the Noxus Piltover, basically, Nexus damage constructed deck that was all about just doing hyper aggro indirect damage to the opponent's Nexus. This was a super popular cheap deck. But our old Legion Rearguard got nerfed from having 2 health down to 1 health.
Yeah, so I think this is a little bit less important in Expedition, maybe, because most of the things that people are playing for like 1 or 2 mana to be able to trade with it have 2 power already. There aren't that many like 1 power units running around in Expeditions. So I don't think it affected the rating that much. It's still like really good on turn 1 and mostly pretty bad on like every future turn afterwards. But yeah,
I think Freljord sometimes has a lot of 1/1s, like Lonely Poro or like the Omen Hawk, that kind of stuff. But I mean, yeah, 1 out of 7 regions is kind of pretty low impact.
Sure.
So.
And of course there are like other like damaging spells like the Shadow Isles one that like drains for 1, like Kempunk Shredder, which deals 1 to everything, and Twisted Fate. So the other regions also have ways to deal like exactly 1 damage, and now Legion Rearguard dies to those. So it is worse for sure.
But I mean, what are the chances that this thing is living past like turn 1 or 2 anyway?
Yeah, it is usually the first creature that I trade off against if my opponent has one, right? I don't want to be taking 3 a turn. I'm going to die.
So that's probably where the limited like impact comes in. It's not like this is a card that's on the board for 4 or 5 turns.
Yeah, exactly.
We got a buff to Kindly Tavern Keeper, so they are trying to kind of pump up Freljord's healing portion of their regional identity. And Kindly Tavern Keeper just got a power buff from 2 to 3.
Yeah, I'm super excited about this because Kindly Tavern Keeper was always my like example of a card that is underpowered because stats just aren't good enough. A 2/3 is something you expect to get like for about 2 mana, not for 3 mana. Whereas a 3/3 for 3 mana is like pretty solid because a 3/3 will trade for basically every other 3-drop and will kill like every other 2-drop. Whereas a 2/3 a lot of the times won't. So this is a pretty big and like kind of important upgrade to Freljord.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of this card. I like to play it in constructed decks anyway, and so I'm always happy just throw an extra power on there. And like we said before, there are a lot of 3-mana 3/3s out there, so now this can trade with it, those cards, instead of getting eaten by them. Yeah,
more generally, I'm pretty happy that like they're trying to improve how good healing is, because I do feel like a lot of Expedition games kind of like end with like players running over each other like too quickly. Sometimes I want to just take things a little bit slower, like kind of like enjoy the late game.
You want those control matches.
Yeah, exactly. Those control versus control expedition runs.
Okay, we got a nerf to Deep Meditation. This is an Ionia spell. The cost was increased from 4 to 5. So this was the 4 cost burst spell that if it would cost 2 less if you had cast 2 plus spells in the previous round, and it would draw you 2 spells. So they boosted the cost up a little bit. So if you do get the cost reduction, instead of being 2, it would be 3. So what do you think? Was this a card that you were taking on your expedition runs anyway?
Mostly not, and this has more to do with the context of the card as opposed to the card itself. I think like 3 mana to draw 2 cards, or 5 mana sometimes to draw 2 cards, is like reasonable on its own.
Yeah.
But the problem is that first it's only other spells, and second it's in the Ionia spell synergy. And I think out of the different archetypes that have like spell synergy like modes, so like there's like Demacia with like Lux, there's like PNZ with Heimerdinger, and there's Ionia with Lee Sin. Right. I think Ionia has the worst spells, mostly because a lot of the spells just kind of do very little. They don't really like, impact the board. So that's why I think Deep Meditation is like a little bit less good than if it was in like PNZ, for example.
Yeah, you get a lot of vanilla barriers in Ionia. Yeah. I feel like, and yeah, like it's cool to like save your unit, but at the same time, they don't really feel like combat tricks, compared to some of the other ones. And yeah, I feel that.
Definitely.
Next, we got a nerf to Boom Crew rookie. So this is going back to that Noxus Piltover or Noxus P&Z aggro. This card actually got a buff, I think, sometime during the beta.
Yeah, it used to be a 0/4, I believe, and they made it into a 1/4.
Something like that, yeah. And now they're nerfing it. So its health is going from 4 to 3. So it's a 1/3 now.
Yeah, I think this is an example of a card that plays very differently in Expedition versus in Ranked. Because in Ranked, it was a really great card just because it kills people and it's kind of hard to deal with. And like the rest of your deck is really streamlined to be able to deal direct Nexus damage and end the game before your opponent can kind of like catch up. But it's really hard to actually make that work in Expeditions. Expedition games all tend to be a lot more mid-rangey. Your deck is not going to be like a perfectly built to kill your opponent on like turn like 4 or 5 or whatever. So as a result, like direct Nexus damage like this is a lot less important. And a 2-mana 1/4 is really bad for board control, as like Vanguard Lookout will probably tell you. So now they've nerfed it even more. I'm just generally not interested in playing this card in my Expedition runs.
What I'm really interested to see is I did play this card in a couple of Expeditions before it got hit with the nerfs.
Right.
And it was kind of funny because people just wanted to get rid of it. like it was Teemo.
Yeah,
they wanted to get rid of it so badly, and you could force some really bad trades and setups because they wanted to remove this thing so much. And I'm curious to see if that like fear of this card remains with the nerf.
Right.
And if it does, I'm curious to see how that affects some of those trades that you can make, given that it has the 1 less health available. But,
yeah, with 1 less health, it dies to a lot of 2s and basically every 3, which is like on a single swing. Like before, you got to probably attack in like twice before it died, so it got to like deal 2 points of damage and then 4 points of damage to their Nexus. Now I think it is like meaningfully worse. That 4th point of health was really important.
We got a nerf to Brood Awakening. So this is the big spider spell in Shadow Isles. The cost was increased from 5 to 6.
Yeah, funnily enough, it used to be 6 mana. Then they, I think, tried to buff it a little bit, dropping it down to 5 because I suppose they wanted to make Shadow Isles stronger.
Yeah, they had made, I think they had taken some power out of either Shadow Isles or the spider archetype in general, and that was to kind of like bring a little bit of that back in.
And I think this one makes a lot of sense, actually. I think the card was way strong on 5 mana. I still think it's really good on 6 mana, honestly. I'm still like playing this card all the time, just because the ability to get a bunch of 2/1s, like 3 2/1s, for a single card is really good in terms of tempo, because like your opponent is only going to be able to like react one. Like you play this card, you get 3/2/1s. Your opponent gets to play like one unit to block maybe, and then you get to like attack with everything, something like that. Or like if your opponent has like a really wide board, you can just play this and instantly like have a bunch of blockers. The ability to just deploy a lot of creatures for a single like priority phase is like really important.
Yeah, I agree. This card remains super annoying. It's
Yeah.
it's a very feel bad card, I think, when you're on the other side of the board, because not only are they putting out those 3 spiderlings, but you like mentally you're like, this is just a stupid spiderling. Why am I having to trade like all my units into this to keep myself from dying? And
Right.
it just feels really bad on the other end of the screen. So yeah, I don't think the cost change is gonna change that too much.
Yeah.
Especially since it's spell mana.
It's spell mana. So yeah, you can still play it on turn like 3 guaranteed, if you just pass turn 1 and turn 2.
Okay. So this one's it's kind of I don't know if it's a hindsight, it's 2020 sort of thing, but we got a buff to Longtooth. So Longtooth is a card on its own, but it's also the Chum the Waters card, right?
It's actually not a card on its own. You can tell because it doesn't have a little icon in the like bottom middle. There's no rarity icon associated, so it only ever comes out of Chum the Waters.
Chum the Waters or Fizz's Chum the Waters.
Or Fizz's Chum the Waters, that's right.
So this was the 5/1 shark, and they increased the health to 2. So now it's a 5/2 with Overwhelm.
It's, I mean, obviously a little bit better, but most of the time nothing has changed, because you're usually using Chum the Waters to be able to give the thing vulnerable, and then you kill the Longtooth. Like, so it's like a deal 5 damage to an opposing unit, and then whatever is left over goes to the face because it has Overwhelm. And it's pretty rare that you pick something that has exactly 1 power to fight off against. But now it's nice that you have the option that you'll still have a Longtooth left over, I suppose.
Yeah, I think more importantly, it's just like this thing doesn't die to super easy removal all the time. Because if you put vulnerable on something, you yank it with the Longtooth, and they make it rain, or they do the Nox's Dagger, or they do the Spider Drain.
Right.
You love all my official card names here. That kind of stuff, man. That just feels bad. That feels really bad. So now at least they have to invest like a Mystic Shot or Noxian Fervor or something, kind of
which is a pretty big deal, because like those cards you were mentioning earlier, those like are a lot cheaper than like Mystic Shot or Noxian Fervor. Like Noxian Fervor has a very real cost for like killing their 5/2, right? You have to like deal 3 damage to one of your own guys.
Yeah. So to me, like when I read it, I was like, okay, they're making it more likely that you actually get in with the Longtooth instead of just getting wiped. So, all right, we got a buff here to Monkey Idol. So the health on this is increased from 4 to 5. Does this matter for expeditions?
That's a great question. I think I played with Monkey Idol exactly like once, and it was awful. So now I'll probably try it again. But my guess is that it's still pretty awful. It's really hard to time, and the worst part about Monkey Idol is that it doesn't do anything when you play it immediately. Like you play it and you have a 0/5, which you can't block with or attack with. So you have to wait like another turn before it starts like doing anything. And what it does for you is like make like these like little 2/1s that like your opponent can play around pretty well.
It's like, why?
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe there's going to be a mechanic in the future, like when something on your board takes damage. I don't know.
Sure. Like there are like a few like cute synergies, I guess. Also, it turns on. Wait, no, it doesn't even turn on Plunder properly, because the Monkey Idols, when it's not your turn, they'll die on your end step, right? Yeah. So yeah, I really don't know what this card is doing, honestly.
I don't either. Oh well, let's talk about Slopbot, which is a card that I actually really do like, just thematically. And so I'm happy to see this. It got a buff. So Slopbot got a power increase from 0 to 1 and a health increase from 3 to 4.
Yeah, when they increase like both the power and the health, you can tell that the card must have been like underperforming a lot
Right.
because like all the other buffs we were seeing, they only like increase health by 1 or power by 1, right? But not both. But I agree with you. I actually really like Slotbot as a card design. I think it's really neat how like every turn like it'll keep growing and you're not really sure where the power or toughness is going.
Yeah.
So it's like really fun to play with. And now hopefully it's like at least a little bit more playable.
Yeah, it really is. I've played with Slotbot quite a bit since the buffs kicked in, and
like all of 2 days ago, you've been playing like a ton of Slotbot decks.
I am gonna have a terrible leaderboard score on Runeterra because I just pick the weird garbage stuff and try to see, hey, is this good? Is this bad? And yes, that meant I picked a lot of Slotbots, and
all right.
yeah, it's pretty crazy. I think on one turn I had like a 9/7 Slotbot.
9/7, wow.
Yeah, like because you just do stuff like, yeah, you got to think about it like this way. You get a Slotbot down on turn 3, right? It's a 1/4. The next turn it gets the +1 stat, right? So you got 6 worth of stats. It could be a 3/3. It could be a 5/1, whatever. You
Hopefully
never
not
know,
a 5/1, yeah.
right? But if you do something like pilfered goods, or you put down.
Oh, that counts as drawing, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because even though you're drawing for your opponent's deck, that's still going to trigger Slotbot.
It's really, there's some stuff on your side that's like kind of nice. If you're doing like salvage or something, if you like, since he's Bilgewater, he fits into some of the plunder stuff. He fits into some of the deep stuff, just kind of depending on what sort of card draw stuff you have. But it can actually get pretty big pretty quick. And yeah, sometimes you do just kind of wind up on weird stat lines. I had him at like 7/2 one time, and I'm like, please don't Mystic Shot this guy. I've put so much into him, but they're for a 3-drop, it's pretty solid, I think.
Cool. I'll have to play with Slotbot more.
Plus, he's just fun.
Yeah.
And he has one of my favorite lines in all of Legends of Runeterra.
Oh, I don't really play with audio on generally. What does he say?
He says, "The treasure was in me the whole time."
That's really cute.
Yeah, I love it. All right, so those are all the like buffs and nerfs and stuff that happened. There are a few cards that are on the watch list. So I just kind of want to bring these up. Maybe we'll just chat about them for just a minute. So the first one is Unyielding Spirit. So if you don't remember what this card is, it is a 8-cost burst spell that basically just makes it so whatever you put it on can't die.
Yeah, they should really call it Undying Spirit, I think.
And I have maybe seen this once in Expeditions.
I have never seen it in Expeditions. I played a lot of Expeditions since the card came out, honestly.
Yeah, and maybe it's none.
I think it's because like it only shows up in exactly like one archetype, and it's an epic.
Right.
I was crunching the numbers on this, and epics show up at about like 1/5 of the rarity of like any particular common. As in like you'll see like a particular common card like Pilfered Goods like 5 times before you'll see like one copy of like a specific epic. And if the epic is in like fewer archetype buckets, like I think Unyielding Spirit is in exactly one archetype bucket, you'll see it like almost never, more or less.
Okay. So they're keeping an eye on it. No changes yet. And as far as Expedition goes, probably not a big deal just because of the frequency in which you see it is so low.
Yeah, and I don't think it, like, just like theorizing here, it doesn't look like a broken card to me because 8 mana is a lot to invest into the effect. For comparison, you might think of like the other 8 mana burst spell is that Freljord one, the +8/+4.
Yeah.
Something
Battle
Rage,
Fury.
I think.
So,
yeah. And that card like will like win games because it deals like 8 damage out of nowhere. But Unyielding Spirit can't do that. It can only keep your guy alive, which is sometimes better, but a lot of times worse than just like murdering your opponent.
Yeah. Now on the other end of that spectrum, they are keeping an eye on plunder as a mechanic, but more specifically on pilfered goods and card stealing, which includes the Blackwater Merchant as well. So the main reason they're trying to keep an eye on this is because people are saying it feels bad to lose your cards when an opponent draws from your deck. But coming from Magic, I'm like, get over it.
Sure, like in Magic, people can not only steal your cards, they can like take cards directly out of your hand. They can like destroy your lands, things like that, like get rid of your mana.
Yeah.
He, I think so. One thing I was surprised about actually when I first read cards like Pilfered Goods and Black Water Merchant. Is that what it's called?
I think it's Blackwater Merchant. It's
Yeah.
not.
I thought the cards actually just drew like randomly throughout your deck. Like they would draw a
Yeah,
card, but I didn't realize it's always the top card of the deck, right?
I didn't
Like
either.
so that actually changes it a lot for like the failure effects you're talking about. When you play something like an Omen
Yes.
Hawk, right? It's always the top cards of your deck that are getting the boost, and now you're just stealing those cards. I saw like somebody propose on Reddit like a change would be like you should just draw from the bottom of your opponent's deck the way like Toss works, and that sounds like a pretty like reasonable and simple way to make it feel a little bit less bad.
I still don't know why it's not just random.
Yeah, random will also be fun, I think.
That's how I read it. That's how I thought it was. And then, yeah, it just draws from the top of your deck. That definitely feels really bad in Freljord. The Freljord deck that I love playing, like constructed, one of them anyway, is the like buff the crap out of my stuff.
I see.
And like that just feels bad. And I think that it's not necessarily that the card stealing mechanic is awful and horrible and shouldn't be included. But
Right.
there is the whole top of the deck thing, and there's also just the consistency of it, I think.
Yeah.
With Pilfered
Like
Goods and Blackwater Merchant in particular. I saw a video on Reddit where someone was playing a mirror match, and basically their Pilfered Goods and Blackwater Merchants kept stealing the other person's Pilfered Goods and Blackwater Merchants, and they stole like 8 cards in a single turn. It was
wow.
ridiculous.
Yeah, I do think these cards are just like a little bit on the cheap side for the effect that they get. They cost only 2 mana each, which is like a very low amount to pay in order to like draw 2 cards more or less. So definitely they're like a little bit overtuned, I think. I guess we'll see like what they try to do about it in the future.
And I think for expeditions, I would say that like Pilfered Goods is probably more of the issue than Blackwater Merchant.
Well, Pilfer Goods is, I think, common and Blackwater Merchant is rare. So you'll see
Right.
Pilfer Goods like a lot more often, just as a card that shows up. And I think both of them are like pretty good, honestly. Pilfer Goods probably like has the edge in terms of like a power level though.
And next, they're keeping an eye on Nexus damage in Rising Tides. I'm kind of like, I understand this, but I'm also kind of sad, kind of wary, because I really like the like Swain style control Nexus damage stuff as
Okay.
opposed to the aggro rush Nexus damage. And I
Yeah.
love, like thematically, I love the siege engines and like all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, this
Right,
is
right.
so on theme, and I don't want them to destroy it.
It is really cool. I still haven't seen like a level up Swain like do anything, which is something I still have like an active goal. Like I want to build a Swain deck that levels up Swain and also like kills my opponent with the Swain. Most of the time I'm just like dealing direct damage with like the Crackshot Courser or something like that, and then they're just dying. But I agree with you. I really wish they could like place an emphasis on like the big swingy kind of direct nexus damage, and less on like the kind of punitive death version.
Yeah, and I actually I mentioned this like last week, playing with a friend. We got a 7-win Noxus Bilgewater expedition run in, and there were like 2 super highlight moments. We did actually kill the opponent and a bunch of their stuff with a leveled up Swain in one
Right.
game. But the other game was just it was amazing. We had the Riptide Rex,
Oh,
and so
right.
we dropped him with the plunder trigger. We had Swain on board,
Okay.
so damage got dealt to everything, kind of everything on board.
Right.
Swain leveled up, and his animation, he like slams down that like token on the map.
Right. Right.
Yeah, so he slammed that down, and Riptide Rex killed the Nexus, and it was just like slam, we win.
Boom. Yeah.
It was so good, but we did manage. I think only once to get a like leveled up Swain to actually do some work and not just
Right.
be stats on board.
Not just be like a 4/7. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the last thing they're keeping an eye on here is Karma and Ezreal. So they didn't have a whole lot to say about this. I know a lot of people were worried about Ezreal with his stat line and his elusive. And then Karma in general is just a like spell making machine.
Yeah, those are definitely more ranked issues than expeditions, though,
Yes.
because it's so hard to get Ezreal like flipped in constructed
Yeah.
in expeditions,
Yeah.
and it's so rare that Karma actually like does the really cool things that you see all the time in ranked. I imagine like when you see it all the time, it doesn't become quite as cool. But like I still really think it's nice when like I can flip a Karma and then pull something off like the Winter's Breath combo or something like that.
Yeah, I take Ezreal sometimes in
Hmm.
Expedition because he is a 1/3 elusive, and the Mystic shots are actually pretty nice if you have the
Yeah,
spell
yeah,
mana and stuff to use them. But also, people, because of that, people really want to get rid of him.
fair
Uh,
enough.
but yeah, I have never even really gotten close to flipping him in Expedition.
Yeah, that requires like a pretty special deck to
Yeah,
be able to do that.
and that deck probably loses in Expedition. So, okay. We're not going to get too much into this, but they updated some of the rules text on cards for clarity. This
Mhm.
has brought about some fun memes. Have you seen the Make It Rain meme?
Yeah, yeah. The
That's,
what
yeah.
was it? Me when I need to add some more words to my essay. I
Yeah.
think.
And it just has, like, I don't know, they added, instead of just deal 3 damage or, 1 damage 3 times to random enemies or whatever, they added like 2 extra sentences.
It's like deal 1 damage 3 times to differently targeted enemies and or your opposing nexus or something like that.
Yeah, something ridiculous. I'll say this, and I'm fine to just leave it here. They've got a long way to go for
Mhm.
consistency in their text and phrasing across all the cards. And I don't know if this is an issue with like multiple people
Mhm.
updating the card text clarity and just not being on the same page or what,
Yeah,
but they got a ways to go.
they do, but I guess it's like a little bit jarring. Like the first time a card does something you don't expect, but like usually you'll like learn it and move on. I'm hoping that like not a lot of people like get turned off of the game because it gets too confusing.
Right.
That's the biggest like thing that they probably want to work on, making sure that like newer players don't get like lost in like what the card is doing and like are still able to enjoy what's going on.
Yeah, I know when I first started playing, like I didn't realize sometimes it was hard to differentiate what spell would hit the nexus and what wouldn't. Like,
Right.
which one I could actually target the nexus with. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
so yeah, I can definitely see if you're not coming from a card game background, you're new to the game.
Hmm.
Definitely can see how there could be some issues there.
Right.
All
Like
right.
we are coming from a card game background, and there's still like a lot of issues for us to like understand what all these cards do.
Yeah. So before we get into the expedition stuff, we got some fun stuff here. Cosmetics and personalization. We'll just do some quick opinions here. So we
Mhm.
got the Rainbow Poro and the Rainbow Poro emote. What do you
All
think?
right. It looks really joyful. My one of my favorite arts in the entire game is the lonely Poro when he turns from the like lonely sad Poro to the jubilant happy Poro, and
Mhm.
this is what this reminds me of the super happy Poro, which it just makes you happy looking at it. That's what I like about it.
So so there's a whole emote meta in Legends of
Oh, is there?
Runeterra. Yes.
Okay,
It's all about like,
I have not been informed.
okay,
Teach
so
me.
yeah, this is a deep nerd thing here, but
All
there's an
right.
emote meta. It's all about your loadout, like the Noxus PNZ burn. They just
Okay.
do like 6 Braum emotes as
Six
their
prom.
loadout
Yes. Okay. Okay.
and just spam that. But I got into a pretty intense emote war with
Mhm.
someone in an expedition yesterday, and it was a
All
lot
right.
of fun. And I love the Rainbow Poro because you just kind of like throw stuff in his face, and it fits so well into so many moments. You
I
just do
see.
something that makes your opponent pissed off, and you're just like, look at me, or they do something to you, and you're like, oh no, like it's great. I love the Poro emote,
Mhm.
and the Rainbow Poro's cool too. I think I actually like it a little bit better than the Moonstruck one.
I think the Rainbow Poro might be making its way onto my emote loadout as well.
Nice. So then we also got the arcade board. So this is a new purchasable board.
Mhm.
What do you think?
I did play against one expedition opponent who had it. It looked really snazzy, honestly. It's a little bit distracting at times because like it like is like super there. But I appreciate all the like the details that go into the cosmetics. Yeah, I really wish there was a way to like earn cosmetics like using my in-game play because I have like a billion like shard saves at this point. But I kind of want to spend some of them on like getting like nicer looking boards.
Yeah, I bought it.
Nice.
So the thing for me is boards are connected to music, and I like the idea of changing the music in the game when I'm playing. I don't like the fact that the boards are connected to the music. It's conceptually neat, but I'd rather be able to mix and match because I love the music for Garen's board, and I hate the way Garen's board looks.
Yeah, that one looks kind of weird. I agree. It's like his face like plastered on like against the background, right?
Yeah, it's like, hey guys. But the arcade board is really sweet, and I love the music actually. So it's a good combo. Also, the other kind of thing for me is I was having like analysis paralysis. Like, do I buy the Noxus board, the Ionian board? What faction am I aligned with? And this was like super neutral. I was like, cool, I can play anything on this.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've been enjoying it a lot. And look up the music on YouTube if you like the music. Definitely worth picking up.
Yeah. Sounds good.
And then we got some new emotes. We got a Draven, Ezreal, Elise, and Teemo emote. So more purchasable emotes available.
Yeah. I haven't seen anybody play these out yet, although the Teemo one looks really slick. It is very representative of what it's like to play Teemo in Expeditions, I think.
Yeah, the person I got into the emote war with had a whole bunch of these. They had just cosmetics everywhere.
Nice.
I just have the board. So I had the board, they had the board, they had the card back, they had emotes, they had a special guardian, like everything. So I got to see a couple of them, mostly Elise and Quinn. I think they used quite a bit, but they're fun. They're fun. I don't know how I feel about emotes. I think now that there's like this weird emote meta thing going on, I'm somehow oddly more into it than it just being generic emotes. And people are right. I've heard people say, like emotes are the only way we really have to communicate, in the card game with our opponent. And sometimes I don't use them at all in a single match, and then other times someone throws me a shin and I throw a shin back. And
I
don't know. I'm coming around to them a little bit, I think.
I like that they exist. I think they're nicer than like the Magic the Gathering Arena version, which is just like like a line that it says. It's a lot more expressive to like see like a funny animation, I think.
Yeah.
And I think on the other side of things, there's like Moto, the old Magic the Gathering online client, which lets you like actually just get into a chat with the opponent. And that one, I don't know if I want to be implemented in Runeterra because, playing online against like random strangers, like sometimes you don't want to go through all the pressure of like, like making sure they're not like a troll or something like that. Yeah, I think I'm happy with where Runeterra landed in its expressiveness.
Yeah. And then they also added a arcade card back, which I think looks really slick, and I am still not quite willing to drop like $5 on a card back.
I see. Yeah, I'm still working my way towards earning all the region card backs from, I guess, getting to level 25 on the region roads. So I'll probably try to do that first before I like think about buying into some like card back like this.
Yeah, and I've bought into Runeterra. I've got coins lying around, but I'm being really frugal and conservative about my spending of them. So even though I think it's really slick, I'm like, I'm gonna wait. I'm gonna see what else we get.
Yeah.
So, all right. So we're gonna jump in and talk about the expedition archetypes here a little bit. We're getting away from some of this fun, fluffy, light stuff and kind of digging back into the meat of what Runeterra is all about. So we're not going to go through and talk about every single change to every single archetype in the expeditions. If you want a really in-depth overview of that, Austin has a good article on Runeterra. I'll let you kind of chuck a pitch in about that.
So what I actually did was I went through and tried to rank every single expedition archetype, both like pre 1.2 and post 1.2, with like a single number, kind of like the average of all the cards that the archetype offers. And like that's kind of like if you see like a lot of S tier cards in one particular archetype, that's probably a better archetype than like the one that has a bunch of like C tier cards, right? So like using those, I like got to see like how much did these archetypes change from patch 1.1 to patch 1.2. And like as you probably expected, we saw like a lot of drops in the Demachian buckets, and this came from like two things. One of which was some of the cards got nerfed, but the much bigger impact was that they actually took out a lot of the good cards in the Demachi buckets and replaced them with like pretty medium to like really bad cards. And I guess you can see that like right around now.
Yeah. So overall, I think really my takeaway from this patch notes is Demacia just got slammed in general. They got hit with nerfs across a lot of their most powerful cards, but then we see some of the buckets, the expedition archetypes that really just got hit incredibly hard. This one here, Scouted Out. This was the one that got hit the hardest.
Yes.
So they removed... And what do you think about each of these? Okay, they removed back-to-back Vanguard Sergeant, War Chefs, and Yeben Ward. Now, obviously, War Chefs, amazing. Vanguard Sergeant, pretty solid. Yeben Ward, I don't know that I really care that much. Back-to-back, I'm personally not sure where I am on back-to-back. I've gotten slammed by back-to-back before, but...
I think back-to-back is actually really good. It used to be even better when it was like 5 mana, now it's 6 mana, and still like quite playable. It'll get your back out of in a lot of like tricky situations.
So some really good solid cards,
right?
All gone from Scouted Out, and what did they replace it with?
Like each one into like a worse version. Like you got now instead of back-to-back, you have Chain Vest, like the combat trick, which like does like very little, almost nothing.
Yeah.
Instead of like for Demacia, instead of Vanguard Sergeant, which makes for Demacia, you only have second half for Demacia. Yeah. And so all the cards that they put in, Chain Vest for Demacia, Mobilize, and Range Resolve, I think they're all like C tier at best, probably like worse, like maybe some Ds, like maybe some Fs. So this is like a pretty big change. I guess they must have seen that like Scattered Out was winning way too often.
It definitely, I mean, it feels that way. And that kind of like, that is the most extreme example, I think, of like really good cards getting swapped out for pretty bad cards. But that's kind of the theme across the majority of Demacia. And on the... Oh, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. And I was going to say, I think that's kind of okay, though. Even on like Runeterra's analytics, you could see that Demacia had like a win rate that was like 63 or 64% versus like 60% on all the other regions. So it just had like a head and shoulders like lead. You just got an advantage just for picking Demacia all the time. I'm glad that they try to like tone that down a bit.
Yeah, I actually was getting incredibly frustrated in expeditions because I wanted to draft and I felt like if I want to draft the best deck and I have Demacia as an option, I have to take Demacia. And every time I didn't, it just felt like, and that just gets repetitive. Not to mention, Demacia's playstyle, in my personal opinion, is a little bit vanilla. It's just like put big stats on the board and use some combat tricks every now and again.
That's exactly what I was going to say, that Demacia kind of has the most like boring kind of playstyle. It's the most standard. You just play like reasonably good units and then like attack with them. But there's nothing like special about that. There's no like combo aspect. You don't get any of the like sweet synergies in like spell archetypes, for example, or like you don't even care that much about your champion in Demacia. Like it could be like anything. You're just like beating them down with units, right? So I much prefer like drafting like all the other archetypes with their weird like intricate like synergies. Demacia doesn't have that nearly as much.
But it just felt bad because I knew I was passing up good cards, and then I would face those cards, and I was like, "Yep, this is about what I expected." Like even though these expedition archetypes are getting changed up, and we're kind of like doomsaying about Demacia's changes here, they're still really strong.
Yeah, so for the most part, the cards themselves haven't been affected that much. So like the Demacian cards are still as good as they used to be, except for the ones that got nerfed, obviously. But like, for example, Vanguard Cavalry is still a very solid 5 mana 5/5 with tough. Vanguard Sergeant is still a solid 3 mana that draws in the cards. They're just going to show up a little bit less often now. You're going to have to work harder and try to avoid these like really bad cards that are getting offered, which I think is a good thing.
Yeah, and for perspective, I did a co-op expedition yesterday with a friend of mine, and we went Demacia, Noxus. I think we might have had like 7 Noxus cards,
Okay.
And
So mostly the matcha.
yeah, it was the most boring 7 win I've ever played.
Fair
There's
enough.
one close match, and the rest of it was like, yep, just stats on board, stats on board, stats on board. What are you gonna do? So yeah,
So it sounds
definitely
like the
still
matcha is
strong.
still like plenty good as an archetype. Like
Yeah,
you can still play it and it'll be great.
yeah, absolutely. Now, for some of the other archetypes, we did get some kind of like buffs and stuff, and I kind of want to hand
Yeah.
it over to you and see if there's anything that really stood out to you that you wanted to mention or kind of highlight as maybe something that wasn't super viable, but maybe now it is, or just anything you kind of thought was pretty interesting or unique.
Yeah, the biggest one, of course, is in Fishbones. I also called this out on the article, but Fishbones was the archetype that got the single biggest upgrade. I think it got like around like 5 points, which correlates to about like one like tier of the letter grade. So going from like a B average to a B plus average, for example, that'd be like about what Fishbones got. And you can see it got a lot of cards changed, but also I want to call that they're changing how the Fishbones champion bucket is actually offered. So in the past, Fishbones, which comes with either Jinx or I think Fizz
Hmm.
as one of your two champions, that still happens. And that used to always come with a Jagged Taskmaster. That's a 3 mana 4/3, which on Plunder gives all of your one drops +1/+0, which is super important because like you're playing. The idea of Fishbones is that you're playing all the cards that cost exactly 1 mana, or cards that make cards that cost 1 mana, like Double Trouble, for example. The idea is you're like a low to the ground deck that like is really aggressive and has like really cheap creatures. You can like play all your units and then like level up your Jinx, things like that. That's like the synergy behind Fishbones, anyways. It was a little bit weak before because, as you might imagine, a lot of the 1 mana units just don't have that much impact in like the
Right.
mid to late game. I'm glad that they're like guaranteeing that you get Jagged Taskmaster and Professor Von Yip, which is Professor Von Yip was always kind of a meme tier card. I'm glad they kind of like built up an entire archetype around him. Yeah.
I had a pick, and man, I didn't like any of my picks. I wasn't. It was pick number one in Expedition. I was
Mhm.
just not thrilled with anything, and I like
Okay.
almost went Poro memes. I had the Braun Poro package.
Yeah.
Fluffed and tough, is that what it is?
Fluff and Tuft, that is
Yeah,
right.
and I was like, oh,
Um,
I can't do this.
Fluff and Tuft is I don't know if they got any changes in this round. No, it
I
didn't.
don't think so.
Yeah, it's according to my archetype score ranking, it is actually the worst archetype. It's something like a C average, just because like all the little poros tend to be pretty bad individually. They get a little bit better with like the synergy. Like when you add a bunch of bad cards but that have good synergy, sometimes like a deck can come together. But it's still really hard to make work.
Yeah. Now, before we kind of move on, I want to put this out there as just a question to the people who are listening.
Mhm.
We're talking about fish bones here, and I know for my parts, I can't say that when I'm drafting, I really take a look at the archetypes and try to build into an archetype. I try
Okay.
to just put together the cards that I think are the best cards, and whether those kind of line up like a bunch of fishbone packages or whatever. I feel like sometimes they do and sometimes they don't, right?
Mhm.
Sometimes you're like, all right, I'm making a deep deck and this archetype has the cards I want, so I naturally just kind of take a lot of this archetype. Versus another one, it might be like, well, maybe I'm not that into the Death's Door expedition type, but this pack of 2 cards is really good with what I'm doing, so I'm going to throw it in there. I want to know if it would be interesting to people to see perhaps doing an expedition and trying to draft into an archetype and what the archetype is supposed to do, and just kind of like seeing how that looks like. Talking about fish bones,
Mhm.
they've got the little 1 sentence description when you hover over it, but
Right.
looking at what you were saying about being low to the ground, aggro, the combos and stuff like that, I know from my part I'd be interested in trying to get in and go, hey, can we actually draft a Fishbones archetype deck?
Mm.
Not just the best deck we can make necessarily with some cards from Fishbones here or there, but like
Right.
really hone in on the kind of theme of what they're doing and just see how it does. That's the kind of garbage tier expeditions I run. But yeah, I just want to see, get some feedback and see if anyone would be interested in that kind of content. Um, while we're here, we're always looking for new things to do, new things to make videos about, and just kind of showcase and help you improve your expedition runs and your knowledge and understanding. So if you got ideas, hit us up. Let us know. Austin has all his contact info over on runeterra.com.
That's
For
right.
me, you could drop all that stuff in the comments. So now we have a big bad video to talk about.
That's right. The What's Next video that just got released earlier today.
Yeah, and we don't have bullet points for this, but I'm pretty sure I can remember everything.
Wow. Okay. Why don't you remind me then? Because I watched the video, but I don't have everything that they talked about off the top of my head.
Okay, so the first things that they talked about was basically all the extra kind of game modes and stuff that are coming to Legends of Runeterra. So the first one they talked about was Gauntlet. And Gauntlet is basically, it sounds kind of like a limited format in Magic the Gathering. Kind of like not limited, sealed in a sense. The idea with Gauntlet is you queue into a gauntlet. There are some kind of weird rules or whatever that they decide to impose on the gauntlet, and you run it like an expedition and try to see if you can get 7 wins.
I see. Yeah. So it's a bit like I think an event that you I'm guessing you'll probably pay some like either like coins into or some like shards into, and then this is me speculating. I have no idea what they're doing. But,
that's most of this is going to be speculating for sure.
Yeah, like probably the more you win, the better your rewards. Very similar to how it goes in expeditions. Only I think instead of using like drafting cards and not keeping them, I think the two comments you talked about, one is just using your current decks, current cards in the standard deck, and the other one is like what's called like a Highlander in Magic, which means you play only a singleton copy of every card. You're not allowed to play more than one copy of any card in your 40 card deck. I think those are the two that they discussed. They're both like based on your existing collection, but you get to play in this like kind of structured mode that's different than like just going on a ladder.
I think the Gauntlet was the constructed one because they said they want to test the underlying tech, so they're not going to add any crazy rules. Yeah, and then they talked about just a general event system where you can earn cosmetics and stuff like that through doing the event. And
that was called I think labs. Maybe was that the
no? There's 3 of them. So there's Gauntlet. Oh, okay. The event was the Highlander one.
Right.
So with that one, they were talking about, hey, this is a way you can earn cosmetics just by playing. I think maybe the Highlander was in there, but then labs was a totally different thing. Where I mean, it sounded about the same as kind of like a Gauntlet, but maybe you're not trying to get to 7 wins. You just kind of go in and there are weird rules and stuff set up for you.
My imagination is it's going to be like the Hearthstone, like really crazy formats, Tavern Brawls, where they like change up the rules of the game entirely. Or maybe if they even go like wider, maybe it'll be like the like an auto chess version of Runeterra. I have no idea, but my imagination is that they'll like be able to take that into like game modes that are very, very different than just like the way expeditions or ranked currently looks.
Yeah, and when it comes to Tavern Brawls and Hearthstone, I kind of have mixed feelings. Like on the one hand, I don't like the ones that want me to construct a deck. Okay. And that's because I like limited formats. And it always seems like, at least on the Hearthstone side, someone figures out a couple of really cheesy decks really quickly, and then it's that constantly. Whereas if you have a Tavern Brawl where you're just kind of queuing in and they give you something randomly and it's a pre-made deck or something like that, then you're really in that sort of, it feels like you just hopped into the middle of an expedition or an arena run or something like that. And I like those a little bit better, but I'm interested to see how, they incorporate that into Legends of Runeterra. So
yeah, definitely.
Between the gauntlets, the events, and labs, my general kind of feeling I got from that was them just kind of saying, hey, we're catching Legends of Runeterra up to where all the other card games are in terms of like stuff that we're doing outside of constructed and draft.
Yeah, like ways to play the game, more or less, that aren't just like the mode that you've played like 100 times already. Right.
And I think that's really important because in these kind of periods between expansions and the periods between the balance change patches and stuff, like towards the end, usually the meta gets kind of stale. People are looking for something else to do, or they could, get a little bit frustrated, or they just want to change a pace. And so having these types of things interspersed throughout, that period is going to be really nice. Really good way to change things up. I imagine there's going to be, times when you're not attracted to a particular event or lab or whatever because it's just not your thing. But there are going to be plenty of times in there where you're going to look at that and go, hey, this sounds really fun.
Yeah, definitely. I'm super excited just as a player to like try out all their like new quirks and like just get a change of pace from like running through, ranked or expeditions all the time.
Yeah, and on the sort of cosmetic event side, this is something I've been saying to a lot of my friends I've been talking to about Legends of Runeterra. I keep telling them, look, it's based off League of Legends. Right. League of Legends has 10 years of history of champions, skins, mechanics, events, cosmetics. Like, all that stuff is going to get funneled into Legends of Runeterra in some way or another. And I don't play MOBAs anymore, but if you log into League of Legends, there's so much stuff to do, so many cosmetics, so many just like interesting things that they've done outside of the game as well. Like, I think that as Legends of Runeterra grows, this is just going to become more and more of a really awesome card game. And for me, like, events in particular are kind of like the first little step there, because there were some really cool events in League of Legends that actually turned into like full blown things. Like they started out with like a little Star Guardian sort of skin set, and it was kind of like a spoof on Sailor Moon and stuff. And that's like blown up into something totally huge over there. And I'm just kind of interested to see what they do and what the cosmetics are, if they have any cosmetics that are different from the current ones.
Yeah, I personally don't pay that much attention to cosmetics. I've always been more about like strategy and like gameplay, but I appreciate that like they're trying really hard to make sure that everyone who like cares about like personalization and having like their identity kind of expressed in like the ways they like skin and like the ways they like play the cards, like they get to do that in Runeterra now too. That's really cool.
Yeah, so that looks pretty interesting. They also kind of, since we're here, this was mentioned a little later in the video, but they did mention that they're still working on other modes that they didn't discuss. And they also mentioned single player content was something that they were working on with no details about it. So we don't know if it's, story modes, if it's solo modes, puzzles. Like, plenty of card games have done solo content, and they dropped literally no hints for that. But it's nice to know they're working on that.
I always really liked the, I don't know if you ever played the Eternal card game. That one was it came out, I think, like a couple years ago. They had really great puzzles to play through that you could try to find out how to get lethal and things like that. And it was also a really good way of just learning like the mechanics of the game. So I think Runeterra has like some of that already, but it'd be nice to like see more.
Yeah, and I mean, Hearthstone has had, like solo adventures where you just play against bosses and go through a whole story. And like I said, League of Legends itself has so much lore, so many stories and things that they could pull from for Legends of Runeterra to create single player content. I think that once they kind of get the ball rolling, it's gonna be really good stuff.
Yeah, I'm excited.
So definitely looking forward
announcement.
to that.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I'm gonna get to the fun one, but
okay.
A couple of other things they mentioned. They mentioned they were working on some changes to LP.
Yes.
The ranked points. They were working on changes to the deck builder. That's something they've been talking about for a while. Definitely looking forward to that. Spectator mode.
Yeah.
They also mentioned tournament mode in there somewhere as well. But who cares? Because what they really talked about was cards, right? And expansions and card releases and more content, more things to play with. And so they talked about kind of two things. One, they have expansions, which are where they introduce new regions. And two, they have these kind of mini card drops in between. So for the expansions are going to be released every 6 months.
That's
Starting
right.
the next one coming up is in August. And then the next one will be in February, then August, February. So basically every August, every February, we're going to get a new expansion that's going to introduce a new region. They didn't give any specifics, but if we look at Rising Tides, for example, you're probably looking at a ballpark 120 cards or so getting added to the game at a time. And then in between there, every 2 months, they're going to do smaller card drops that aren't going to introduce new regions. We don't know if they'll actually we don't know any of the details. Like, my speculation is that there won't be any champions for those. And that they're probably only going to do like 1 to 5 cards per region.
I see.
Something kind of small scale. Because if they're doing 120 for an expansion and then they're pumping in, these 2 mini releases in there, I can't imagine if they did every time they add a new region, that's that many more cards that have to go in those little, packs or whatever. So if they did 2 per region right now, that's still a solid 14 cards already. So I don't know. What do you think? What's your speculation on that stuff?
I think they'll probably go a little bit deeper than just like a couple of cards on the region like launch on each like mini expansion, maybe just because that wouldn't probably be exciting enough. I would guess like probably it'd be like a champion and the associated cards, because like if you think about like the way a lot of Runeterra cards have been designed, usually it's like there's like a package of cards you want to play together. Like with Nautilus, there's like all the deep cards and all the salvage, like all the toss cards. That's kind of like a package, right? Or like with like Misfortune, that's kind of like a plunder package, things like that. So I imagine like they'll release like a new package, maybe like exactly 1 champion for each region plus like the support. That's my guess for what the mini expansion is gonna have.
Yeah, and see, I look at that and I'm like, man, that just seems like too many champions in a year. Because if they put out 1 per expansion, and then they put out, the 4 in between, right? So you've got 6 champions a year per region.
I see what you mean. So you might start running out of like champions. Like I don't know how many League of Legends currently has. It's like on the order of like 100 or so. Is that right?
Like 160-ish. I think
160, sure.
It's a lot, but if you look at it, like, so every time they add a region, right, that multiplies the number of champions and stuff. So we get 3 more regions. We're at 10 regions, right, in the game. And then so if they did that mini patch and they put out a champion, they're putting out 10 champions, and then 2 months later 10 more champions, and then 10, like,
okay, so maybe you're right. Maybe that's a little bit too frequent.
Now they did say that when an expansion comes out, that region is featured for like 3 blocks of content, basically.
Right.
So the region and the 2 little content drops after that should be the ones that are kind of synced up with whatever that expansion is doing. So we're not getting those mini card drops. We didn't hear anything about getting that kind of stuff for Bilgewater in this section, because it's kind of all starting with the next region expansion in August. But as an example, like Rising Tides would have come out, and then our 2 little card drops in between now and that new region would have been like Bilgewater themed.
I see.
So I think maybe that's the opportunity to introduce some more deep cards or plunder cards or whatever, or maybe see how kind of like the meta has shaken out for that particular expansion and go, oh, well, we can diversify here or shore up this kind of archetype that didn't work out very well by adding in these little cards here, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious how they're going to tackle the issue of card rotation. This is something that Magic has had for a while, and Hearthstone had to implement like a few years after the game was launched. But I imagine like if they keep on releasing more and more like new cards, right, they're eventually going to have to find a way to like tone down the availability of cards in like the standard or like the current meta, so that people aren't just like overwhelmed and like trying to play catch up all the time by like having to like buy all the like wild cards and all the like shards to craft like the different possible meta decks. So I'm wondering, like, it's probably like a little bit early for them to have to worry about like cutting cards out of the meta, but like eventually that's something that like Runeterra is gonna have to do, I think.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting to me. I think the rotation is definitely a concern. And also, I'm surprised they haven't announced like a region cap. You know,
Cap. I
like
see.
because they literally put it out there on the
Mhm.
stream saying, an expansion will introduce a new region.
Right.
And it's like, is it going to do that for the next like 3 years? Like, are you just going to do every
Ah.
region in Legends of Runeterra? Like, if you think about it, in Magic, you
Yeah.
got like 5 colors.
That's right.
Hearthstone, you got 9 classes or whatever, and
I think they
that's
just introduced like one new class, the
yeah, the Demon Hunter.
Demon Hunter one, right? But that was like in like I don't know, like what 7 years of a Hearthstone gameplay.
Yeah, and the difference with Hearthstone is you don't combine your class cards with another class's cards. You use a
Right.
neutral pool, so that's a little bit different. Here, it's kind of like if Magic was like, okay, in 6 months we're introducing purple, and then 6 months
Right.
from there yellow, and then 6 months from there brown, and you're just like, you can only ever combine the two regions and stuff. Like I just feel like there's some sort of bloat there, and I really want to know like what is the plan? Like how does that even work? Do they rotate
Yeah.
out entire regions if a
That'd be kind of
rotation
cool, I think.
happens?
That changed the meta by a lot, obviously. But I think that'd be like kind of interesting, just to see like if they want to like keep it so there's only ever like 8 regions in the meta, and like regions will come and go, and people can like wait on like their favorite region to come back. Maybe
Yeah,
I don't know.
I don't know. It's strange. And then like if they rotate a region back in, like has the card number changed? Like there's so many issues there, and I'm just really surprised that they haven't been like, oh yeah, we're gonna be capped at X regions or whatever.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
there's go
it's
ahead.
still like really early on in Runeterra. Like literally, this game came out of beta like what, like a month ago.
Yeah.
So I don't think like they're too worried about it yet. Like that's like the kind of thing that like you can worry about like once like you have like those 10 sets. Right now they're probably just focused on like making sure the next like 2 or 3 regions that come out are like fun to play and like keep things fresh probably.
Okay. So I got two things left here that I just want to throw in here at the end. So how
Yeah.
familiar are you with like League of Legends and the lore and that kind of stuff?
I've played like maybe one game of LoL in my entire life, so not very familiar.
Okay, so I've been playing for like 9 years.
Okay.
Stopped playing for several years, but I always jump back in. I keep tabs on the lore and the champion stuff. I've really liked it. I'm the kind of person that they're gonna put out a new champion. I'm gonna be like, oh, it's that one. So we have a pretty good idea of what the next region is,
Right.
actually.
Okay.
The speculation, the pretty well-founded speculation, is that the next
Spoiler
region,
alert, I think, in
no,
case anybody
too
like wants
bad,
to
too bad,
not see.
is Targon. So Targon is kind of like a sort of mountain, like
Okay.
big giant, think like Mount Olympus, sort of,
Yeah, sure.
in League of Legends. And the champions have a lot of like sun and moon and stars and astral sort of like vibes.
Okay.
No idea how that's going to work, but it's not confirmed, but there were data mined
Right.
voices from
Okay.
a League of Legends or Legends of Runeterra patch.
Right.
And in that data mine content, they data mined all of the Bilgewater champions voice
Okay.
lines before Bilgewater came out,
Right.
the Bilgewater ones and the ones that dropped for the other regions in Rising Tides.
Okay.
And the rest of the data mined voices adds up to
Okay.
one additional champion per region that currently exists, including Bilgewater, and an appropriate amount of Targon champions.
Okay. Interesting.
So I won't take the spoiler beyond that. If you don't know what Targon is or anything like that, like I'll leave it there. I will say like my favorite Targon champion is not in that data mined stuff. So
Aw, sad.
I'm a little sad. But I'm looking forward to it. I think there could be some pretty interesting mechanics that come around from that. So I wanted
Yeah.
to throw that out there. And the last thing that I wanted to mention
Mhm.
is skins. So
Ooh.
League of Legends champions have all kinds of skins.
Mhm.
Okay. And I've been wondering, are they going to actually make card skins?
I see.
So Magic the Gathering kind of
Right.
does a not amazing job of this, but they have card skins, like cosmetics you can put on your cards to make them look a little fancy.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if this is something they might do as a way to do cosmetic microtransactions. And
Um,
I was
hmm.
digging around for it, and I saw an interesting post,
Okay.
and I also kind of drew something else from that post. So the post basically said that instead of skins being cosmetics, they could be alternate ways to create the same champion again. So if you think about planeswalkers in
Okay.
Magic, you have like Jace, but there's like 8 different versions of Jace, or
Right.
whatever.
Right.
And so maybe you have Garen, and then a skin for Garen isn't a skin that you apply to the base Garen. It's a different style of Garen. Like, or
Yeah.
he could have different mechanics and stuff like that.
That that is something I actually think would be really, really cool. And I
Yeah.
imagine you can only play like one copy of Garen in your deck. Like you have to choose between the different Garens, and like maybe they both cost 5 mana, but they have slightly different like stat sizes and different mechanics, different level of abilities. That would be really interesting, I think.
Yeah, it's a
And
good way to avoid like when they run out of champions. Like at some point they're going to catch up,
right,
and are they going to just start making new champions? No, I think they would do something like this.
yeah,
But take it to the next level. Some of these skins are actually themed in League of Legends
right.
after the other regions. So like there is a Warring Kingdoms Garen where it's
Oh,
Garen, but he looks like he's from Ionia.
oh, interesting.
And so I was like, what if, yeah, they did something like that, but then they also could do that thing where they actually like take Garen and pull in this Warring Kingdoms version, and now he's an Ionia card. Like not the same Garen that exists in Demacia, a
Right,
different one,
right.
but yeah.
That'd be really wild. I would like to see that. Yeah.
So let's get our hopes up and be disappointed horribly.
I'm sure they have other things to excite us with, even if it's not like this exact implementation. But I think that makes a lot of sense.
So I don't know. I wanted to bring that up. I'll probably talk about that more in the future, but that's enough of a tantalizing teaser for now. So
Yeah, like again, it's only been like a month into open beta, a few months since like the game was launched, and there's already so many crazy things that we want to see. We've got a lot of hopes pinned on this thing.
yeah, and there's the thing that's comforting to me is it makes me realize the like breadth of options that they have and the depth
Yeah.
of content that they can put out. So
Mhm.
the only thing I'm worried about is if Six More Vodka stops doing their card art, like what
Oh
happens.
yeah. They've
So
done such a fantastic job of making, and also just as like a developer, like making like Runeterra. I really appreciate that they made all this art like available for us to use, just like as like
yes.
graphical assets. That is really cool, though.
Yeah, it's amazing. All right, well, that is going to be the end of the video here, going over the patch notes.
Mm.
Lots to talk about. Future patch notes, I'm sure, will not have as much stuff going on, especially not with a what's next video,
No, no, not
content
special
drop.
today.
But I want to thank Austin for joining me. And once
Mhm.
again, remind everybody that we're here for Runeterra.com, a website all about improving your expedition experience. Austin?
Yeah, thanks for tuning in. Runeterra's got some of, let's see, really good strategy articles to get you better at the game, but also, like, of course, our tier list and our expedition tracker. And one thing that I'm currently working on is a way to show all the ratings inside the game itself as an overlay. Like you might have seen this for like other card games, for other like trackers. So that's like I think that's in like beta right now. I'm gonna be like working on that like over the next few weeks.
Awesome. So lots of good stuff coming. The website's going to continue to grow. We're going to
Hmm.
continue to create and put out more video content, written content for you guys. So please leave us feedback. You can contact via runeterra.com, or you can drop comments on the video here. Get in touch. Let us know what you'd like to see. Let us know if we're helping, how we can improve. And yeah, let's all have fun. Good luck in your expeditions, or have fun in your expeditions if you are drafting a bunch of jank like me.
Or hopefully both. All right.
All right, everyone. Catch you later.